Sadie Morgan, as Richard pointed out, is founding partner of DRMM, but
right.
also critically and really interesting, I think, for the whole world of infrastructure, the chair of the HS2 design panel, and also more recently a member of the National Infrastructure Commission. So lots of things to really get stuck into with Sadie. Thanks for joining us. We're going to kick off and really ask you, I suppose, to talk to us really about the HS2 design panel in particular. And it's got a crucial role in supporting and challenging the design process across the whole of the HS2 design process. And your aspiration that it really covers the whole of the design experience. And I suppose the question is, you know, how will you do that? How will you influence that whole design process?
Well, first of all, it's not my aspiration, so I think that's really important to point out. About a year ago, High Speed 2, well, a year and a half ago, High Speed 2 went to the industry. It asked about 100 people from various sort of disciplines to come in and say, and teach them, talk to them, discuss with them what good design looks like and how they can be a good client. And from that process, they published their design vision. So their design vision was published pretty much at the same time that my appointment was announced. And it sets out a vision that talks about people, place, and time, and it has huge aspirations in terms of making sure that good design covers, as you say, everything. It's not just about the architecture, it's about website, ticketing, the trains, the experience, absolutely everything. So they've set a very high bar, and they asked me to chair a group of people who would give them, be their critical friend.
One of the things you have said is that the value of design cannot be underestimated, but we need to get it right from the start to finish, from procurement to delivery. Yeah. I suppose, from what you've seen, does the project need help?
Yes. I mean, every project needs help, and I think that, I look at my own business and we have design crits every Wednesday, and often it's the year out student or the, it could be anybody who says, who asks the simple questions, who says, have you considered doing that? And it's at those moments that you think, golly, actually, I've been so focused on doing this that I haven't remembered to do, I've been so focused on X, haven't remembered to do Y. So for me, I've always said that the panel should be supportive, it should be inspirational, it shouldn't just be there as gatepost reviews. This isn't, I don't want this to run like a normal design critique process, because the project's going too quickly to make that happen. So there's no point having a design, a group of people who say, okay, bring it to me just before you're going to deliver on stage C or stage D, and we say, oh, we don't like the look of that, start again. There's no time for that. So it has to be a fluid process, and we have to design a way of operating that fits in with that, and that still manages to offer what HS2 need.
Because one of the other things you also said is that under your direction, the panel will assure the DFT and the public that design decisions that deliver against the design vision, consider all needs, and are robust and transparent. I suppose I look at it and think, well, so how will the process that you're going through differ from, say, the process that Crossrail has gone through?
Well, I mean, the big difference is it covers everything. So in that sense, we are focused on customer experience as much as we are, what the train will ultimately look like. And in terms of how the process works, as I said before, it will differ, I think, from how we do it. So I'm looking at, say, mentoring. So it might be that it isn't the group of people who are critiquing. It might be that you have a one-to-one, you have a one-to-one meeting with one of the incredible panel members, and that person within HS2 is able to just kind of chew the cud. So it's a process that isn't specific yet, and we are trying to be fluid in the way that we operate.
Having an aspiration where you actually are thinking about design, right from the very start, but also the entire customer experience. Yeah. That means, in many ways, getting in really, really early.
Absolutely.
Yet you have a project which has been going for quite some time. Does that create a tension in that oh no, Sadie's turned up, we've got to start again?
No, that's a good point. Not so far. Everyone's been very polite.
All right. Anybody in the room? I don't know.
Yeah. I have to say, everybody at HS2 who I've met absolutely wants wants to be involved in this. And it's been, I haven't had to push on any door. They have been open. People are coming to the panel, coming to me and saying, will you come and talk to us? Will you come and give us some advice? So, of course, when it steps into delivery, if it gets royal assent, that might be very different. There may be, when the time pressures, I mean, there are huge time pressures, obviously, but there'll be times, I imagine, when things will get a bit hairy, and the last thing anybody wants is any external input, regardless of where it comes
because presumably there will be a point where the parliamentary process will finish, and suddenly there'll be a knock on someone's door that says, right, we're ready to start, are you ready?
Yeah, exactly.
And they'll say, no, we haven't finished with Sadie yet.
No, it's not like that at all. I mean, our input will be, I'd like to think, small and often, rather than big and infrequent.
So the HS2 the vision, the design vision, talks about design thinking, talks about leadership and creative culture. From a design perspective, is it about the look and feel of the service? The colour of the trains, the colour of the seats, or is it about the culture?
No, it's about the culture. I mean, you can't. It isn't about. Of course, it'll be about the look and the feel of the seats, but it'll also be the fact that maybe the seat is already prefixed in the position that suits you, and it'll mean that everybody can use it regardless of ability. And it's not just about the physical, the physical object. It's very much about the experience. And just to tie up, if you said, is it too late? It's not too late. Some of the pilot projects we've been working on is actually taking those people at HS2 involved in customer experience and giving them talks by head of Virgin, customer services, taking them to their offices, showing them how it works, walking with them through the transport system with people of various ability, and teaching them and showing them what it means to be in, carrying a double buggy or carrying.
As you said,
a long time since I had children.
Well, yeah. Well, as you say, the aim is to mentor and inspire HS2, and I suppose you've got 45 people on this panel.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
And
what are they all going to do?
Well, when you look at the range of disciplines you have to cover, it's extraordinary. So actually, it might be that you only have 2 or 3 of each discipline on the panel. We're not going to sit at 45 people all at one time. So that's just to be clear. It would be impossible, and as good as I am at chairing, I think too difficult.
No, it's got a big meeting. Yeah.
It's quite big, and the bunch of designers in the room will go on forever. So what happens is you say, okay, here's a specific issue. Let's pick the expertise that we need, and it might not be, if you're looking. Say you're looking at a station, it might, it's not necessarily going to be 4 or 5 architects. Of course, you'll have a whole group of people who'll have a whole wide range of input. The whole point is having a different perspective on the questions that might be asked.
Because presumably amongst that 45, there will be regional specialists, but there'll also be discipline specialists. So,
absolutely. But there are also regional panels.
Right.
So there are, say Birmingham has its own design panel, which is made up of half of its regional representatives and half of panel members. Right. So there'll be key elements on the route which will have their own local input. Right,
and presumably, as the project progresses, that panel will get bigger, will it? Or will it?
It'll change. It won't get. It's unlikely to get bigger, but because you're using the time of people as opposed to the people themselves, then yes, if you need extra disciplines, you'll bring them in. But it'll also be fluid, so we don't expect the same people to be necessarily on the panel the whole way through. I'm hoping for change, in fact.
I just think if there's anyone here that feels they should have been on the panel, they can still get a look.
No, absolutely, and I think that absolutely, because as the process moves forward, so at the minute it's civils, next is stations, then is the train. So as we, when we move through to the next stage, there's plenty of people who applied, who one would hope would be ready and willing to come back at that point.
So let's talk about I mean, what you consider to be good design, because I suppose it's quite a big area.
Yeah.
And I suppose your background at DRMM is, I suppose, in architectural design excellence.
Yeah.
And what you've said is, first at HS2 you need to understand what successful design looks like.
Yeah.
I suppose, what have you concluded?
HS2, if you have set out what they think good design looks like. So, if it works seamlessly, if it offers regeneration, if you're thinking people, place, time, if it stands the test of time. So good design for me is something that works, that's intuitive, that fits into its place, that people enjoy, that offers delight. Yeah. And
well, give me some examples. I know you don't want to give examples of what good design, but okay, because obviously you'll miss some out. Okay, so give me some examples in your own practice that you think have been good, or people that you've worked with in your own practice that have been really good designs.
I mean, we work collaboratively with a lot of people. If I think about the projects that I've enjoyed most, I mean, lots of them are personal milestones for me. So Centaur Street, which looked at a very different way of housing design. It's a sort of mix between the sort of industrial and the smaller cellular type spaces. I think that was it was very different at that time, of housing design. I look at something like Sliding House, which I think was our smallest project, but probably had more hits on YouTube, like 1 million hits on YouTube, and it's and had a set of German students making it out of Lego, which was very interesting in filming it. But that, I think, is about those projects that show inventiveness and lateral thinking. So how do you have a house that responds to the seasons? Well, you make sure you move the walls and the roof in order that it can change over time. So
those examples are about getting people to, I suppose, think about the infrastructure in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, it's about interaction. Like we had the endless stair outside the Tate. That's a very small installation, but it was used by everybody in totally different ways, from the flash dance mob to people getting married on it to people just enjoying it. And then the bigger projects that we've worked on in, our housing in Battersea and King's Cross, it was all about the public realm. It was all about trying to maximise the space around the buildings to make sure that you had a sense of community by not having a slab block, but by having towers with very smaller numbers of apartments off them, so everybody would meet their neighbours. There's ways in which you can, I think, engage with those things that matter to you through good design. Which is
interesting. Another quote that I have pulled from you about HS2 is that a successful HS2 will engender national pride matched by a sense of local ownership, and it should be designed to last.
Yes.
Well, it does kind of it does seem to match what you were saying about what you feel about good design. But I suppose, apart from scale, is this any different from any other brief then?
No, I mean, it shouldn't be, is the answer to that. You should, whenever this country builds anything small to big, it should aspire to do the absolute best that it can. And this is the biggest infrastructure project this country has ever undertaken. And if we can't end up with something that we're proud of, then it would be very depressing.
But it's also a project which is going at an incredible rate of knots. It has to. Well, some might say it could go even faster. In fact, they've just accelerated a bit of it. But it is going at a very fast pace. So, is it possible, therefore, to curate this clear sense of, or a clear brief, which actually doesn't just deal with what is known, but actually sets a brief for the design of perhaps things we don't know about it, the digital technologies of the future, the way that people will be using stations of the future. How can you include that design brief, given the scale and the speed of the project?
It's difficult, is the answer. I often it's about running things in parallel. I think if you have a very focused single line of route, then you don't allow anything to change. You have to have an element of flexibility. You have to have a vision, yes, absolutely, but you have to have a vision that allows for for changes along the way. Now, if you have to deliver on something and you're piling through, then if you have other streams that are doing that outside thinking, who are future thinking, and who are able at the right time to drop that in or to make the change, which in a way that shows that there is no implication on time or program, then that's one way of helping that process.
Because one of the challenges, I suppose, is that if you are thinking too far in the future, then it could have an impact on potentially on the cost, because I mean the designers and the contractors, they really want to know how many ticket barriers do we need.
None, I hope.
Well, there you go, but or maybe 100. You know, so you know, therefore to build in that the options in there, does that, you know, is there a risk that it may slow things down, or it may add to the costs or add to the complexity unnecessarily?
I think, you know, projects like this mean, you know, it's a cry to everyone, and everyone has to step up. It's not just the designers, it's the you know, it's those who are going to construct it. Everybody has to start to think a bit more collectively, a bit more cleverly about how to mitigate those potential risks. Yeah. Now, I don't have the answer for all of those things, but I think that good design shouldn't mean, you know, it should mean things going quicker. It shouldn't mean things going slower. Okay.
Your career has been characterised by this, you know, this multi-role of being a designer, but also business management, and also really understanding procurement. I suppose, why is that important when you're actually looking at getting good design into a project like HS2?
Throughout my career, I've always looked at things in the whole. So that's from how do you make your team happy? You know, a happy team produces work that is good and full of joy. And you don't do that necessarily just through the work that they're doing. You do it by making their environment nice, by making their conditions good, by listening to them. How do you then take that example and put it into a bigger, wider context of a project? You know, how do you collaborate well? How do you partner properly? One of our first projects at Kingsdale School, you know, we won an award for consultation, innovative consultation. You know, that was 15, 20 years ago. So how do you design processes that aren't just about that, the sort of straight line design, but how do you have a much more holistic look? And you know, I think girls are good at it. Yeah. I have to say, we are. You know, I'm not saying boys aren't.
I like the
I don't have an experience of being a boy, but all I can say is that I do. You know, if there's anything I can bring, it's a capacity to look at a lot of different things and to see how they fit together. I don't know. You know, that's just one of.
No, I like the idea of getting awards for chatting to people. It sounds good. So, you know, I suppose, are you happy in your work now?
I love it. I absolutely.
But one of the
love
other, good. I know, but I genuinely think you are. Yeah, I genuinely think you are. I think that is an interesting part of the way you work. But you also say it being influential without being disruptive. But disruptive's good, isn't it? Is there ever a role for disruption?
Yeah, no, a bit of disruption is definitely good. If you can achieve anything through sort of collaboration and bringing everybody along with you, I think that is the absolute way to make things work. Now and again, you know, when things are going well and everything's kind of, everyone's sitting back, sort of patting themselves on the back, that is absolutely when you need to poke them where it hurts and make sure that they are continually thinking about how to make things better, or continually thinking about the wider issues, or continually, you know, so it's more about not just defaulting to the status quo. I mean, the status quo is fine, but it's never going to deliver something that's extraordinary. Diversity
in this profession is very, very important. And I suppose you are the 4th woman president of the Architectural Association. You were until earlier in the year. And you could argue one of the most influential women in the industry at the moment. I talk about, you know, disruption, and to a certain extent, you know, that is what you kind of do in a very nice way, obviously. But I suppose, how can that disruptive element that you have, how can that help, I suppose, to try and boost the numbers of women that are in the industry, the number of women that are working on a project like HS2, the influence that women have in the profession?
Well, you know, I'd hope leading by example is one of the things that any woman can do. when they're in a position of some sort of authority. If you look at architects, 50% of all people going into architecture are women. It's not. I mean, I think there is a wave of us girls coming through, and yes, we have to get it. We have to get the environment, the working environment, right. So, whatever their life choices are, they're able to continue in their career. But for me, it's just I am, I am who I am, and I would hope that that the young girls in my office, as well as the young boys in my office, would look at me and think, well, if she can do it, anyone can.
Well, no comment. No, but you say that women bring you unnecessarily. Women bring vibrancy and sensitivity to the world of design and architecture, is what you've said in the past. I suppose what can you grab and grasp what is holding back women, not necessarily in architecture, but maybe in engineering design or in any other aspect of the world of a project like HS2?
It's impossible. It's impossibly difficult to say. To be honest, I mean, I think often it's a matter of history and the fact that women haven't necessarily gone into these professions. There just aren't that many women at our senior level, but there are plenty of women at more junior levels. Maybe not so much in engineering. There's still big work to be done in schools. There's still big work to be done in educating young women that this is a career that is interesting and is that they're completely capable of doing. So when you say, what can I do? I tend to shy away from doing women events at our level of the industry, but I go very often to schools. I'd much rather talk at a school so I'm going to a young girls' school in 2 weeks' time. Missing a very important meeting to do it, I'll tell them that. But in order to say, in order to try to engender some kind of enthusiasm with those young women to say that actually this is a career that's interesting, that it gives you great fulfillment and you can have really good fun doing it.
So, I mean, it has been said about you, as somebody else wrote.
Rather than myself.
When you won an award, it was a CBI Women's Women in Business Award.
Yes.
And what the judges said is that you change the architecture industry through your balanced, relaxed, and empowering management style. I mean, how do you describe? That's how they describe your style. How do you describe your style as an influencer, as an industry leader, as a practice leader?
I just am myself. I don't. I've learnt early on not to try to try to deal with issues. I'll deal with an issue on my own terms. If you're, I think it's just saying I have these types of skills, and if I don't have those skills, I can go and learn them. I like to think that just by encouragement and by listening to people and saying I'm interested in what you have to say I don't think happens often enough, actually, especially when you're growing through your career. It's not often that, I'll go around every Tuesday and I'll speak to everybody in the office and I'll have a little chat, and it might be a personal chat or it might be a chat about what they're doing, and that's my style. I'm much more sort of hands-on, but in a connected, personal way.
You made the point earlier about the fact that it is about collaboration, it is about teams of men and women.
Yeah.
I mean, do we overplay this issue in the industry? Can it ever be overplayed?
I don't think you can. I mean, you should always be cognizant of it. It should always be something. I am generally, if I go to an awards dinner, I will be the only woman at the table. If I stand up at a press conference, I am the only girl at the press conference, or and that's. You get used to it, but you shouldn't get used to it, and people should be aware that that's the case. But I should also say, just changing the point slightly, about collaboration and teamwork is important, but vision is also important. You have to have a team that's going somewhere. So how you make sure that that's put down, and it is something that everybody can look to do, I think is super important. So you can have teams of people working on something, but you need to, they all have to know where they're going.
And you mentioned the press conference where you were the only woman. Of course, the most recent example of that is when you stood up in the York Railway Museum,
yes.
which I imagine you've been to many times.
Many times, yes.
With two bald blokes and a chancellor.
Something like that, yeah.
Obviously, this is obviously I'm referring to the National Infrastructure Commission. You are one of 7 on the National Infrastructure
yes.
Commission, and of course, in that case, you're not the only woman.
No, Bridget's there with me. Yeah.
But let's talk about that role you've got there, because in order to look to the future, you need a vision, as you just said. In order to create that vision, you need people who can think and imagine the future. Were you surprised to be invited to join that panel?
Yes, I was pleasantly surprised. If you look at the wealth of talent surrounding me when I went to my first meeting, one always wonders, why you're there, and then when you start to contribute and people listen to you, and you ask the questions that no one. I'm very good at asking the questions no one else dares ask, because I don't have a massive ego, so I can.
Which is interesting. Yeah, which is interesting.
And then everyone goes, that's a good point. So I have huge confidence in my ability to. To ask the questions and to make sure that they're being, they're part of the conversation, and B, that that now and again everybody does look up and think, oh yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at this.
So what does design excellence contribute to delivery, to accelerating delivery? I mean, the National Infrastructure Commission is about accelerating delivery. It's about getting those projects actually that the nation needs. How does design excellence help that?
Oh, I think excellence helps in lots of ways. For instance, if you are looking at those people now in government who are, who are looking at these big infrastructure projects, they are beginning to realise that design matters. That actually, if you look at the end result, I know I'm talking about often looking at the beginning, but let's say if you're looking at the end result and you're seeing these large-scale infrastructure projects around the world that are on time, on budget, they look amazing, they work seamlessly, they have huge, the passengers love them. That is showing that well-designed projects make a massive difference. So
what makes you say that the politicians, what makes you say that the people driving these projects have that impression on design?
They just have more knowledge.
Right.
And I think it's becoming so obvious now, with the amount of big projects around the world, with the influence that designers, architects, engineers are having on these big projects. The ones that are successful, plenty of examples where they're not, but those big projects that are seen as a great success, those people in power are beginning to realise they just didn't materialise from thin air. They had a group of very talented, creative people involved in making them.
But so are you saying that you're actually seeing decision makers realising that if you invest in good design,
absolutely,
it will actually, because there's pressure on budgets around the world. There's no one's got enough money to build what they need. Are you saying that you're actually seeing people realise that investing in good design
I believe so.
saves?
I believe so, and I also passionately believe good design does save money. It's and that's the crucial turning point in the minds of the public and of those decision makers. As soon as everybody gets off the mindset that actually, bring a designer in and it's going to double the cost, it won't. It may well halve the cost. We are
only double.
Yeah, we are. No, it's exactly. See, if you're like it, I also hope for the rest of us. No, it's that immediate assumption that we have to change.
So you had your first meeting on Monday.
Yes.
What happened?
What can
you tell us?
I've signed something called the official seat. No,
don't worry, we're all friends. It's fine.
As you know, there are 3 things that the Infrastructure Commission's looking at. First off, so the northern transportation, particularly the Transpennine Link. energy, how we can look to make sure that the energy efficiency and the lights don't go off, and also priority transportation in the London area, including Crossrail too. So we spent our first commission looking and listening. We went to Clapham Junction at peak time, saw how it's managing its crowding issue, which is, well, let's say we looked at the challenges facing.
Because you're specifically looking at London.
John and I are looking at London. In particular, I'm looking at how transportation may help to solve the London housing crisis. So a big passion of mine, so I'm very excited about that. But we basically looked and learned. We listened to a lot of people. We had all views on, whether or not Crossrail 2 should happen, whether or not it should happen, the benefits and so forth. So really it's a listening exercise. It's a gathering of intelligence so that we're able to make, reasonable recommendations.
And having been to Clapham Junction, what have you learned?
I tell you what I did learn is that that you can do incredible things in terms of just putting in new technology. So they're looking to increase capacity just by changing to a digital system. That's an infrastructure that is about technology. It's not changing anything, not changing platform widths, platform lengths, and their ambitions and the differences that will make will be huge. So I've learned a great deal, actually. Much more about trains than ever thought I would.
So when's the first decision? When's the first output from the commission?
The first output will be before the budget next year. So those three things are specifically being looked at to input into the Chancellor's budget. At minute, they're just putting the legislation together, so they are having a consultation document that's gone to the Treasury and then will go to the Cabinet, and I think that will hopefully be published mid-December. And then once we're put in statute, we'll become we'll be properly independent.
It's a wonderfully diverse bunch of people.
It is.
I mean, why is that good for a commission then? You sit around the table with this diverse bunch of people. Why is that going to give the nation a better insight into what it needs to prioritise? Because
with anything, a great conversation is made up of people who bring different views and different ideas to the table. You have a group of people from Lord Heseltine, regardless of your politics. I have to say, 83 is one of the brightest people I've ever sat next to. His experience and positivity balanced with cynicism of the process is extraordinary. You have Bridget, very well. Then you have Demis, who, like me, is very interested in thinking about the future. We've been asked, yes, to look at three specific things, but we've also been asked to say, how can we look 25, 30 years ahead and make sure that Britain is ready and we are leading the way. So, he's the CEO of DeepMind, just sold it to Google for £400 million. He's not short of a brain cell or two, let's say, and an extraordinary thinker and passionate about new technology, and that's not a passion necessarily some of the others share, but they have a huge skill set in other ways. So it's a fantastic mix, and when you hear the conversations that go around, you realise that everybody is actually there for a very good reason.
And it is that focus on, I suppose the art of the possible.
Absolutely.
The technology that you can bring in, which I suppose is that what excites you about HS2 and the National Infrastructure Commission? It's what will the future bring that we can include in infrastructure?
I think what excites me is having the knowledge now and the foresight to not make big mistakes, and we have to combine that with a vision and a belief in ourselves as a group of creative people that we can do it. And I think if you ask me anything about the future, I would say what we have to do is make sure that this industry starts re-believing in itself, in it collectively. You know, we send our designers and architects all around the world to deliver everybody else's amazing big projects. You know, we have the talent. We have the belief?
Final point about delivering that vision for the future. You say we're delivering around the world, but what are the missing skills that that you think from the work you've been doing at the Commission and also the design panel? What are the missing skills from perhaps in this room that we need to really take that next step towards, I suppose, a whole life value, a digitally enabled future, a more collaborative future? I mean, what's missing?
Well, it's sort of exactly that. What's missing is the fact that if I look at the Infrastructure Commission and the job that it's doing, it's trying to say, okay, let's collectively think, not in 30 years' time. So we're not focusing in on what matters to this government, you know, what's going to get it re-elected in the next 5 years, the next 10 years. As industries, you're pitted against each other, and of course, you're all vying for the same job and so forth. HS2, you'll have a group of people all trying to make the best, add the best value to each piece of the jigsaw. How collectively then, when you're competing with each other, can you bring those skills together? If somebody has a fantastic idea, how do you make them share it with their competitor? You know, it's
have you worked that out? Have you got an answer? Because the siloed nature of the business is always been there. The fact that most people like to keep their best ideas back because of the commercial value that they have. I mean, how do you get over that problem?
I don't have the answer. I have 40 people who I help while we come to it. But the first thing about getting to an answer is asking the right questions. And when you're in the beginning of any process, you have to work out what it is that you're trying to answer. Now, for me, if I look strategically across all the things that I've been working on and all the things that I've been interested in, I think, how do you join those collective big thinking ideas together in some way that as an industry, not as individual bit parts of the industry, but as an industry, we can deliver something, as good as HS2 should be. You know, it absolutely should be well beating.